Good morning, guys, and welcome back to the channel. If you've been following along, you already know what our project is. If you don't, this is Lizzie, our 1951 Dodge Coronet that is body swapped onto an 03 Crown Vic P71 chassis. And if you've watched the last number of videos, you know that we have been building an LS to go into this thing. So, I'm going to consider this the official part 1 of how to LS swap a Crown Vic. And this is definitely not the first time this has been done. However, most of the swaps that I've seen tend to be either race cars, where a lot of stuff gets eliminated, or a lot of stuff gets glossed over. And there was a lot of little details that I am still figuring out for the swap. First of all, this is 100% a street car. We are keeping the stock AC and heat, which does make it a little more complex, a few more things to figure out, but I think we are going to be able to make that work. So, we've already got the stock 4.6 pulled out of the car, so now I will throw a quick little time lapse in of us pulling that out. Alright, so I spent a little bit of time this morning power washing the cross member, cleaning things up a little bit. We didn't go too crazy. So, said with the engine out, this is the 2005 LQ4 6-liter and 4L80E transmission that is going back in. Like I said, we've had the build videos on doing the engine. The transmission is just a stock 4L80E with a stock torque converter. With the exception, I did put most of a Transgo HD2 kit in it. I did not film any of that just because I am not that transmission savvy. There are some very good videos going over exactly how to do that. So I will, if I remember, I will link those videos down there. They can do a far better job of explaining what I did than I could. So probably the first place to start. So the first goal is to obviously get this thing physically mounted in the car. So the first thing that typically comes up is, what engine mounts do I use to LS swap my Crown Vic? Well, believe it or not, this is actually one of the simplest parts probably that you will run into on the swap. It is not expensive, it is not difficult. So, on the Crown Vic, the little pedestal there and there are where the stock Crown Vic engine mounts have a stud on them, and they slip down through those holes, and there is a nut up from the bottom. It is slotted already on that side. On this side, I did slot it a little bit for some adjustments. However, you do not need to do that. It's just a regular hole typically on that side, but it'll still fit without even modifying that. So, on the engine side of it, so we start with these engine plates here that bolt to the engine. They are for a 79 to 04 Mustang, specifically to do an LS swap. So there are the 2 bolts. I'm sorry, I already have the stock Crown Vic engine mount bolted up to it, so it's a little hard to see, but I'll do my best to explain. So the plate that sits there, there are 2 bolts right there that bolt to the LS, and then 2 bolts up there, and then there is a 5th hole at the back here. This is a stock Crown Vic engine mount. The only thing that I had to do, it was on, I think it was this hole here. You have to elongate the hole in the engine mount just a little bit, and then The stock engine mount simply bolts directly up. The little leg here has the nut and bolt for that. And then the plate gets sandwiched between here, engine mount, the plate, and then in the engine. And then you see the stud on the bottom that drops in. You do have to elongate that hole on both sides of the engine, but otherwise, that is all that's needed. It will drop in just like that. Now, I did have a friend who did an LS swap, and he told me to use these, so I did not come up with this on my own. But yeah, that's what is required for the engine mounts. For the transmission mount, you can see it back in there, and I will be pulling that out to show you exactly what I'm having to do there. Unfortunately, that's not quite as simple. You do have to do some cutting and modifying to make the stock crossmember work. Basically, once you pull the transmission crossmember out, you flip it around, and then, but you do still have to cut some of the front in order to clear the transmission pan on the 4L80. So I'm not done with that. I'm still in the process of modifying that. But as far as physically mounting in the car, that is what is required. It doesn't hit the transmission tunnel. It doesn't interfere with the steering shaft. Oil pan wise, we are using a Holley 302-3 knockoff from eBay. It is pretty low profile at the front. And you could also go with like a 302-1. I believe that fits about exactly the same. And it clears the crossmember absolutely perfectly, does not hit at all. All right, so I had mentioned that we have a slight change of plans, and for the time being, we are not going boosted on the car, which is definitely a bit of a bummer. That's something I definitely wanted to do. However, when I started test fitting the turbo and the manifold and everything, there was not as much space as I was hoping. And I'll show you once I get the engine back in the car. And if you're building a race car, this is not an issue. But with the heater box and everything here, there was not much space for a downpipe. Now, granted, I could have went out the fender, down, and tried to snake it back around because I don't want just an open fender exhaust. I want a full exhaust on this thing so it's nice and quiet. So there was not much room for a downpipe, and the other big thing was, and you won't be able to tell until I have the radiator back in, but the radiator stack sits right in here, and I actually had to lean it back a little bit in order to fit the hood. And on a normal Crown Vic, you're not going to have this issue, and so you're going to have plenty of space up front for an intercooler. But seeing as how, not exactly a Crown Vic body anymore, we don't have as much space up front as we used to. I could have still put it on the outside where the intercooler would have just sat on the outside of the radiator, but I wasn't sure that was going to look good either. So after much deliberation, I decided for the time being, I'm simply going to go naturally aspirated, and then I'm going to save up and hopefully eventually do a supercharger. We have plenty of space on the top of the engine, so I think that's the route we're going to go for now. So I'm definitely a little bummed on it. The car is obviously not going to make the power that we were originally, going for, but it is what it is. I think this is the most practical and easiest route to go for now. It saves me money, it saves me time, so that's what we're going with. So I picked up a set of long tube headers. They are stainless ones from Speed Engineering, part number 25-1025. They are technically designed for a Chevy C10. They are universal, but for Chevy C10 and a few other GM cars. And so obviously I didn't know if they were going to fit or not. They are 1 3/4 primaries. So they do fit with some modifying. So on the passenger side, You do have to notch the corner of the Crown Vic engine mount. I had to put this over. I had to dent the tube a little bit there. And then there's an ear on the transmission that you do have to cut off here. But as far as the passenger side, it doesn't take much modifying at all to fit. So that one's good. The driver's side, unfortunately, is a little more involved. So if you are doing this, I'm not sure if I would recommend these exact headers or not. Maybe a set of, for a Mustang LS swap, maybe the route to go. Obviously, I didn't know what shape these headers exactly were going to be. The biggest issue I ran into is the engine mount on the driver's side, you have to modify fairly heavily. So I cut off the corner of the engine mount there, and then did some trimming on the back side of it, and then did some denting on the back of a tube as well. So be aware of that. You do have to do some cutting and grinding to make them fit on the driver's side. Otherwise, it fits great as far as the transmission and everything. Once I get it back in the car, hopefully, I think the steering shaft should clear okay. So not quite a direct fit on the driver's side especially. And so just be aware of that. So I got those modified. What I am going to do, there was originally a rivet right here holding the engine mount, like the two halves together. So I think I'm going to weld along the top of it. That way it make sure it doesn't come apart. I don't think it'll be an issue, but it is tight with the engine mount. All right, well, I've got the engine back in the car. The headers are not fully tightened because they'll have to come back off in order to weld V-band flanges down in the collectors eventually. But for the time being, the car is sitting back in the car, and hopefully for the final time, we'll see for sure. Maybe for some reason it'll have to come back out. But I'm kind of randomly jumping around here, but I decided I'm going to be working on a couple of these sensors to make the stock gauges, the stock Crown Vic gauges work. So I am keeping the stock coolant temp sensor here on the driver's side front on the engine there. So the LS standalone harness will plug into there to read coolant temp. And then what I want to do for the stock Crown Vic temperature gauge, it doesn't give me an actual number, so it's obviously just kind of a rough idea, but I still wanted to keep that working. So what I'm doing for there, I picked up a M12 by 1.5, which is the LS side for the sensor, to a 3/8 NPT adapter, and then I've got the stock Crown Vic temp sensor, simply threads into that. And one thing I didn't know, just learned today, on the LS, because the heads are same side to side and they're just flipped, there's actually a plug that goes in right there into the side of the head. So I simply pulled that plug out. This will screw in, and then I will use some of the stock wiring from the Crown Vic, plug into that, and we will have the stock temperature gauge working. All right, well, seeing as how we're kind of randomly jumping around on things, one of the things I decided to tackle was the AC lines. That was probably one of the bigger things that I wasn't sure how I was going to figure out, and I think I came up with a solution. It's a very simple one, actually. It should work. I don't see any reason why it shouldn't, but I'm no AC expert either, so I guess we'll see. All right, so I am using the stock Denso AC compressor that came with the LS. Here are the two lines that come out of it. The bigger one is considered a number 14 AC line. It is 3/4 inch inside diameter. And the smaller one is a number 8, and it is a 13/32. inside diameter. And thankfully, these are the lines from the stock Crown Vic. Thankfully, they are the same size. So like I said, there's a couple different ways you can do that. How I am going to do that is I had this piece of the AC lines from the LS, from the junkyard still, thankfully. So I'm going to reuse that section and the little section in the smaller one. And then there is a company called Retrofit USA that they make a lot of different AC parts. And so what they also make is these splice kits. So pull this out of the bigger one. So it's simply a pipe that looks like that. And then there's the small one. It comes with O-rings that go on each side to seal it. And then it has these clamping rings that simply will slip over the rubber hose. And then you can see the little rings there. They do sell the tool, but my brother already had a tool that I think is going to work fine, which looks like this. And then it simply crimps those little rings down, and that's it. Then it seals. So we'll be using those. And like I said, these are the stock Crown Vic lines. It originally had a block down in the bottom where it went into the compressor. And so then these are the one fitting there goes up to the, I think it's a condenser. I don't know my AC components very well. And then the bigger line goes right down into there. So we are going to cut off these ends of the lines. We'll kind of mock stuff up, figure out what length I need to cut the stuff on, and then I can simply crimp those hoses onto the ends of there, and that should be it. I'm using all the stock Crown Vic AC stuff otherwise, and I wanted to keep it that way. That way it's all nice and simple. I do have to get a new clutch kit for the compressor. The old one was shot or very rusted up, so I'll have to order that. So I'm going to get these crimped up, and hopefully that'll take care of our custom AC hoses. The other way you could do this, and maybe that would be the best way, is just getting custom lines made with the end like that, and then the end that matches, you know, the ends at the other end. But this was something that I could do myself. I didn't have to buy an expensive crimper. These splice kits were 20-some bucks a piece, so not bad at all. So, all right, so I've got the lines all done. The bigger one on this end was definitely a pain because it is a 3/4 inch inside diameter. However, the outside diameter was like 1.25 inches, where this was like 1 inch on the outside. This side slipped on easy with these clamps. This side I had to take a little belt sander and actually just dress a little bit off the outside in order to get it to fit, and it was very much a tight fit. So hopefully that should be good though. Small side, didn't give them any issues, very easy there. So worst case scenario, if I get a line on either side that leaks, obviously they're not new lines, so there is a chance of that. I can either get stock Crown Vic side or stock LS Chevy Silverado side, and then simply cut them, get new clamps, and then the rest is fine. So they are serviceable or fixable in the future if I ever need to. So I'm going to throw these back in the car, and hopefully AC wise that should be all that's required, short of, you can see here, there is a, some wires that go into that, so we do have to figure a little bit out there. But as far as the physical, the line side, that should be done. All right, so you can see here the AC lines where they hook into the stock compressor there. Here's where I crimped them. And then they run up and just kind of loop around. One runs to there, and then the other two, there's two lines that run up to the condenser. I think it's a condenser at least. So yeah, that's how those look there. They did require a little bit of bending in order to clear stuff, but I think it's going to work okay. So, all right, what we're working on next. Here you can kind of see the aftermath of a bunch of connectors and doing wiring. I have been working on trimming down the stock Crown Vic harness here in the engine bay to keep the just the essentials that I want. So it's very much a mess at the moment, but I'll go over that at a later point. So I've got the transmission crossmember out here, and you can see this is where I had to trim. So in the car, originally the crossmember, this was the front. So basically, so like if we're in the car here, this would have been facing forward. The transmission had two holes here that it mounted into. So what I am doing, I simply flipped the crossmember end to end. This way, this will point towards the rear of the car, and I drilled a hole there, and then a bigger hole here. That way I can fit a socket, and it'll go up. This is the bottom. It'll go up, and then hook into the 4L80 transmission mount. So now that I've trimmed this out. It requires trimming all this in order to fit the transmission pan. So now that I've got this cut out, made sure nothing hits, I'm going to work on plating this back in. All right, so we have this all wrapped up. We got this all plated in, so that should clear fine. Gave it a little coat of primer and paint, so this thing is ready to throw back in. All right, so we finally have the engine and transmission bolted back into the car for hopefully the final time. I've got the transmission crossmember all bolted back in. That definitely fought me a little bit, but we got it done. You saw we got the headers bolted up. Those will still have to come back out because we have to weld V-bands to the ends of those. And I've been bouncing around working on a bunch of different stuff. So I will start to cover more of that in the next video. You can see back here, we have our stock Crown Vic coolant sensor threaded into our adapter and into the head there. And then you can't see it, but around the back we have done the same thing with the oil pressure sensor. So those are two of the stock gauges, hopefully figured out. So those should work fine. So I know it's been a lot of talking in this video, and I know it's a little more boring just listening to me ramble on versus actually see me working on this stuff, but a lot of this stuff just has taken me a long time to figure out and, figure out how I'm going to do it. It would have been a very long process if I would have filmed everything, and I didn't want to make the video too long, so I'm going to wrap the episode up with that. So as always, thank you guys for watching. I appreciate it. I'll see you in the next video.